The day I decided to leave, a small gathering materialized in the office, supposedly a farewell celebration orchestrated by my colleagues. Yet, amidst the forced cheer, Joan, the intern who had started her journey at the company alongside me, wore an expression of stark disbelief. Her eyes, wide with a mixture of confusion and something akin to accusation, fixed on me. "Why are you suddenly quitting?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper above the murmur of polite conversation. "You took credit for my work before, and I let it slide. Just stay." Her words, laced with a false sense of camaraderie, grated against my nerves. Without a word, I brushed past her, a dismissive gesture that sent a ripple of surprise through the small crowd. I snatched my bag from my desk and walked out, the weight of past injustices a heavy cloak around me. In what felt like a lifetime ago, Joan and I had indeed begun our internships at this very company. Two hopeful aspirants vying for a coveted permanent position. Driven by an almost desperate ambition, I had poured countless nights into crafting what I believed to be the perfect proposal, a meticulously researched and innovative plan designed to impress the higher-ups. But then, with a sickening twist of fate, Joan had submitted an almost identical proposal mere moments before I could. The fallout had been swift and brutal. I was branded a plagiarist, a leech who preyed on the ingenuity of others. Isolation became my constant companion, punctuated by the venomous whispers and averted gazes of my colleagues. The situation had escalated to a terrifying climax when one of Joan's fervent admirers, a man consumed by an unhealthy obsession with her, had deliberately run me over with his car. The next thing I knew, a disoriented haze lifting from my consciousness, I found myself inexplicably back in the familiar sterile environment of the office, the date on the corner of my computer screen confirming it was the very day of the plan's submission. Joan sat at the adjacent desk, her face alight with the warm glow of the supervisor's approval. A small, shy smile played on her lips as the supervisor's voice echoed in my ears. "Joan, your proposal is excellent," he had declared, his tone effusive. "You've considered the market aspects thoroughly. It's practically flawless. Everyone should learn from it." The sound of his praise sent a jolt through me, the phantom sensation of the car's impact still a chilling echo in my body. I snapped my head up, my gaze sweeping across the familiar office, the fluorescent lights casting long shadows. It was undeniably the same day, the same moment before my carefully constructed future had crumbled. "I thought through everything," Joan added, her voice demure, basking in the supervisor's attention. "I even did field research to verify the feasibility." Jack, a boisterous colleague, chimed in, eager to contribute to Joan's moment of glory. "Yeah, I bumped into Joan at our store over the weekend. Even on weekends, she's gathering data." My eyes were glued to the screen displaying Joan's proposal, every word, every detail, a mirror image of the plan I had conceived in solitude, never once sharing my ideas with another soul. A cold dread washed over me. How could her plan be so perfectly, so impossibly identical to mine? The horrifying events of the previous timeline began to replay in my mind, each moment a fresh stab of anxiety. Lost in this whirlwind of disbelieving thoughts, I barely registered the supervisor turning his attention to me. "Lisa," he said, his voice carrying a note of expectation. "It's your turn to showcase your work, but I haven't received your plan since this morning. Did you complete it?" The words caught in my throat. I wanted to say yes, to declare that my plan was equally excellent, the very plan he had just lauded in Joan's presentation. My fingers tightened around the hard drive containing my work, a knot of confusion and apprehension twisting in my stomach. How could I explain the inexplicable similarity? How could I articulate the sinking feeling that history was about to repeat itself, only this time I held the power to alter the course? The crucial difference was that, in this iteration, I had yet to submit my proposal. A wave of grim determination washed over me. I would not allow the past to dictate my future. Lowering my head, I gritted my teeth and offered a carefully constructed lie. "Sorry, supervisor," I mumbled, feigning a lack of confidence. "I'm still getting used to the work, so I didn't finish on time." The supervisor's face darkened with displeasure. He slammed his phone onto the desk, the sharp sound echoing in the sudden silence. "The company isn't here to support slackers," he snapped. "You and Joan joined together and are in the same team. She can over-deliver, but you can't even hit the basic completion? There are limited positions, so make the most of it. I remained silent, my gaze fixed on the floor, absorbing his reprimand without protest. Jack, ever the supervisor's loyal follower, seized the opportunity to further solidify his standing. There's the difference between people right there, he sneered, casting a smug glance in my direction. He received a subtle nudge from Joan, who offered a saccharine smile and said, "That's because of your great teaching." Watching their carefully orchestrated display, a bitter laugh echoed in the confines of my mind. In the previous timeline, the discovery of our identical plans had ignited a fierce confrontation. Desperate to clear my name, I had presented the extensive groundwork I had meticulously laid, hoping to prove the originality of my work. Just when I thought Joan was cornered, she had produced an equally convincing set of evidence, with Jack readily offering his unwavering support. As a senior staff member, known for his sharp intellect and perceived fairness, Jack's endorsement had instantly cast me in the role of the guilty party. Unable to provide further proof and witnessing the hushed, accusatory whispers of my colleagues. Haven't seen someone outright steal another person's work in ages. Better keep my distance. People like that should be fired. I had felt the walls closing in. Joan, ever the master of manipulation, had burst into tears, accusing me of plagiarizing her hard work, her performance bordering on theatrical fainting. Furious and defeated, I had stormed out of the office, only to be pursued by Jack, who had demanded an immediate apology to Joan. My refusal had been met with a shocking act of violence in the parking lot. It was only in the aftermath, as I lay injured and bewildered, that the chilling realization of Jack's obsessive infatuation with Joan had dawned on me. But this time, things would be different. This time, my goal extended beyond simply proving my innocence. This time, they would face the consequences of their actions. As the meeting dispersed, the office gradually emptied. Joan approached my desk, her hand reaching out to grasp my arm. "Lisa, don't worry," she said, her voice laced with a false sweetness. "I know you're capable. Something must have held you up from completing the task." She offered a playful smile. "You must do your best, too. I hope we both stay at the company." Her forced cuteness sent a wave of nausea through me. Back at my desk, I deliberately ignored the remaining colleagues and focused my thoughts on the perplexing question of how Joan had managed to access my meticulously guarded plan. Aside from the possibility of her sneaking a peek when the office was empty, I couldn't fathom how she had obtained such detailed knowledge of my work. The idea of her following me home, of her surreptitiously entering my apartment while I slept to scrutinize my files, seemed too outlandish, too much like the plot of a poorly written thriller. Yet the chilling reality of the identical proposals loomed large. Driven by a need for answers, I applied to review the office security footage after work, fabricating a story about a lost personal item. Patiently, I watched the recordings from the day I had begun working on the proposal, my eyes scanning the frames for any interaction between Joan and my workspace, any telltale sign of her accessing my computer. The footage revealed nothing. Neither Joan nor Jack had approached my desk or tampered with my belongings. But then, as the timeline progressed to the day before the submission, the video feed from the camera in my area abruptly cut out, the screen dissolving into a static-filled blackness. "What happened here?" I asked the security staff, pointing to the sudden interruption. "The camera in your area broke then," one of them explained matter-of-factly. "We've scheduled repairs for tomorrow." The timing felt too convenient, too perfectly aligned with Joan's potential need for unsupervised access. Could it be that she had seized the opportunity presented by the malfunctioning camera to examine my proposal? While there was no concrete evidence to support this theory and no one I could discreetly ask for confirmation, a sense of unease settled over me. Caution, I decided, was my best course of action. The following day, a new team task was assigned, and I resolved to safeguard my work with meticulous care. Every time I left my desk, even for a brief moment, I made sure to lock my computer screen. After work, I diligently copied all my completed documents onto an external hard drive, which I would then take home, permanently deleting everything from my computer's hard drive. This way, I reasoned, Joan would have no further opportunity to pilfer my ideas. The day before the looming deadline, Joan approached my desk, her demeanor radiating an unsettling blend of concern and veiled urgency. "Lisa, how's it going?" she asked, her voice pitched slightly higher than usual. "Need any help? We can't delay this time, or the supervisor will have a word with you." Instinctively, I minimized the document on my screen, my gaze meeting hers with a defensive edge. "Almost done," I replied curtly. "Wrapping it up soon." She persisted, her eyes lingering on my screen. "Want me to take a look?" Startled by her forwardness, I quickly refused. "No, thanks," I shot back, adding a probing question of my own. "How about you? How's yours coming along?" Joan responded with an unsettling confidence. "I'm almost finished too. I've come up with an amazing idea this time." As she elaborated, a chilling wave of recognition washed over me. Her amazing idea was the very core of my proposal, the innovative solution I had painstakingly developed after hours of brainstorming and research. How could she possibly know? The blood ran cold in my veins. The rest of her words faded into a meaningless drone. I was lost in a sea of disbelief and growing despair. Lisa, what's up? You think my idea is great too, right?" Joan beamed at me, her smile almost blinding in its artificiality. I forced a weak yeah to my lips. "Good luck, Lisa," she said, turning to leave. "I'm heading back." Once she was gone, I reopened my document, the words on the screen now mocking me. The joy I had once felt in my work had evaporated, replaced by a gnawing sense of violation. After a few moments of agonizing contemplation, I made a drastic decision. I deleted everything, the culmination of days of effort vanishing into the digital ether. The proposal was due tomorrow, and with no time for another meticulously crafted draft, I had no choice but to start anew, to create something entirely different. Working late into the night, fueled by a potent mix of anxiety and determination, I finally finished a revised proposal just before midnight. To prevent any further unforeseen circumstances, I immediately sent it to the supervisor's email. Despite the late hour, I managed to get a surprisingly refreshing sleep. The next morning, I headed to work with a renewed sense of purpose, a fragile optimism fluttering in my chest. But as soon as I stepped into the office, I was met with a palpable shift in the atmosphere. A chorus of hushed whispers followed me as I walked towards my desk. "You hear? Lisa didn't finish her task again, and she even passed someone else's work as her own." I heard. The supervisor was fuming this morning. They said it was Joan's she stole. She even emailed it overnight just to fake it as hers. We better steer clear of folks like her. What do I do? She sits right next to me. Can I apply for seat change? The snippets of conversation, sharp and accusatory, struck me like physical blows. Just then, the supervisor emerged from his office and beckoned me over. "Lisa, come to the office." When I entered, Joan was already inside, her eyes red and swollen, her expression one of utter devastation. The supervisor sat down, his gaze direct and unwavering. "With just the three of us here, Lisa, tell the truth. Did you use Joan's proposal?" The question felt like a plunge into icy water. So this was how it had turned out. Despite all my precautions, I had still been unable to escape the shadow of accusation. Where had I gone wrong? Joan turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "Lisa, I've always been nice to you, never given you a hard time. Why do this to me? If I hadn't been sleepless last night and decided to send my completed proposal to the supervisor, I'd have had no defense. If you want a promotion, we can compete fairly. Why stoop to such sleazy tactics? What's stolen remains stolen. It'll never truly be yours." Her accusations poured forth, leaving no room for my own explanation. She was clearly playing the victim, her feigned outrage a carefully constructed performance. The supervisor pulled up our proposals on the screen. Except for the names, the content was, once again, a blatant copy. A grim amusement flickered within me at the sheer audacity of it all. Joan might have somehow accessed my initial proposal, but surely she couldn't have replicated the intricate details of the hastily revised version I had submitted last night. I pointed to a specific section on the screen. "Joan," I asked, my voice calm despite the turmoil within, "how did you analyze this particular set of data?" I expected her to falter, to stumble over the explanation. Instead, She articulated the entire process exactly as I had conceived it, her words mirroring my own thoughts with unnerving precision. Then, with a seemingly timid glance, Joan turned to the supervisor. Enough, the supervisor said, his voice heavy with disappointment. Lisa, I brought you here hoping you'd own up to anything wrong so I could give you another chance. But it seems you show no sign of remorse nor willingness to admit anything. The gap between your interview performance and now is profound. I think it's time to seriously consider your position here. He stood up, exasperated. Then his attention shifted abruptly to Joan. And you, Joan, he said, his tone sharp. Your last proposal was impressive, but this one is a mishmash, full of inconsistencies. Even the basic framework is wrong. Joan looked up at the screen, her face a mask of surprise and confusion. After Joan had left the office the previous evening, I had deleted my initial proposal, the one Joan had so effortlessly copied. Knowing there wasn't enough time to create another perfect draft, I had quickly cobbled together a deliberately subpar version, riddled with inconsistencies and flaws. My intention had been to test a theory. Would Joan, in her relentless pursuit of my ideas, mirror even my deliberate mistakes? Today's verdict confirmed my hunch. She seemed to possess an uncanny ability to anticipate my every move, to access my thoughts as if they were an open book. With her around, I knew that any truly original work would forever be under threat. As the supervisor continued his reprimand, I reached up and unclipped my company badge, the plastic cool against my fingertips. I tossed it onto the desk, the small clatter echoing in the tense silence. I have nothing more to say, I stated, my voice firm and resolute. What I create is mine. I have no interest in claiming someone else's as my own. I'm resigning. I'll draft the letter and submit it to the system soon. Please approve it promptly. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out, indifferent to their reactions. I was tired of pouring my energy into a place where my efforts were consistently exploited, where my originality was met with theft and deceit. I was done with this charade. But then, just as I reached the outer office, Joan came running after me, her footsteps echoing on the linoleum floor. She positioned herself directly in front of me, her arms outstretched in a dramatic plea. I simply ignored her, stepping to the side and continuing towards the exit. She was relentless, her voice rising in desperation as she pursued me. Lisa, you're just mad, right? I'll talk to the manager. I won't hold it against you for taking my proposal. We were supposed to stick together and stay at this company, remember? The evaluation is just around the corner, Lisa. Ah. Her persistent pleas were grating on my last nerve. I spun around and slapped her, the sharp crack of my hand against her cheek cutting through the tense atmosphere. A moment of stunned silence followed. Joan's hair fell across her face, obscuring her reaction, but I could well imagine it. We had undoubtedly created quite a scene. Several colleagues, feigning diligent work, were clearly observing the unfolding drama with avid curiosity. "What did you do to Joan?" Jack shouted, rushing towards us and roughly shoving me aside. He immediately turned his attention to Joan, his face etched with concern. "Joan, are you okay? Let me see your face." Joan instinctively recoiled from his touch, then, realizing it was Jack, her expression shifted to one of awkwardness. I'm fine," she mumbled. "Apologize to Joan now," Jack growled at me, his eyes blazing with a possessive fury that bordered on madness. The memory of him deliberately driving his car towards me in the previous timeline flashed vividly in my mind, a chilling reminder of his volatile nature. To avoid provoking him further, I offered a perfunctory apology. "Sorry," I mumbled, feigning a touch of remorse. I got a bit emotional. Forcing a strained smile, Joan said, "No worries. But Lisa, please don't leave. I didn't mean to tell the manager. Stay, will you? Maybe you'll pass the evaluation and you get to stay." I suspected her pleas were less about my well-being and more about the potential loss of my ideas. Only a fool would remain in such a toxic environment. But outwardly, I played along, feigning distress as I took her hand. "With my abilities," I said, my voice laced with false resignation, "staying here eventually isn't likely. Leaving now is better than being kicked out later." Then, a sudden thought struck me. "Oh, by the way, I added, a saccharine smile playing on my lips. Isn't Nick interested in you? You two would make a cute couple. I genuinely wish you both the best. Just remember to invite me to the wedding. My words seemed to please Jack, who nervously touched his thinning hair and let out a self-satisfied chuckle. Yeah, Joan, as long as you're here, who cares if Lisa leaves? Hearing his dismissive remark and noticing the curious glances of our colleagues, Joan subtly distanced herself from Jack, a flicker of discomfort crossing her face. But she started to protest, then seemed to reconsider, ultimately saying nothing. Seeing that Jack had calmed down, I took it as my cue to make my escape, leaving the messy aftermath behind me. Soon enough, I completed the necessary exit paperwork, a feeling of liberation bubbling inside me. I hummed a cheerful tune as I packed my remaining belongings. As I walked out of the company building, I glanced back towards Joan's empty desk, a fleeting thought crossing my mind. Who would she try to copy next now that I was gone? I packed my things into my car and drove back home, the familiar streets of my neighborhood, a welcome sight after the stressful environment of the office. Usually, my cat would greet me with an enthusiastic rush to the door, but this time it remained aloof, observing me from a distance. When I tried to pet it, it let out a sharp hiss, its fur bristling. Perhaps it was the unfamiliar scents clinging to my clothes, the lingering residue of the day's unpleasantness. When my father arrived home later that evening, he found me lounging on the couch, a facial mask plastered to my face, my legs crossed comfortably as I watched television. He looked slightly perplexed. Is something up at work today? Why are you home so early? I shrugged nonchalantly. I quit. My father burst into laughter, a hearty sound that filled the living room. I told you. I could just give you a position. But no, you insisted on starting at the bottom. And now you quit on your own? Honestly. The truth was, the company where I had interned was one of our family's subsidiaries. Back when I had graduated, my father had offered me a comfortable position within the family business, but I had stubbornly refused. I had envisioned working my way up the corporate ladder as a personal challenge, akin to leveling up in a game. So I had applied to this particular company and had been hired based on my own merits, or so I had believed. Little did I know how things would ultimately unfold. I munched on sunflower seeds as I recounted the day's events to my father, explaining the strange occurrences and the final decisive act of resignation. He listened intently, his brow furrowed with concern. He, too, sensed that something was amiss, and promised to discreetly look into the matter. With my newfound freedom, I indulged in a period of travel, exploring new cities and immersing myself in different cultures. The distance and the fresh perspectives gradually dulled the sharp edges of the past annoyances. Although I was no longer employed at the company, maintaining connections within its ranks proved surprisingly easy, given my family's ties. As I had suspected, after my departure, Joan's performance took a noticeable nosedive. Without my ideas to draw upon, she failed to produce any significant proposals or achieve any noteworthy results. At times, she even struggled with the simplest tasks. Thanks to Jack's continued, albeit somewhat misguided support, she managed to avoid outright dismissal, but her earlier, seemingly brilliant work was nowhere to be seen. While I was still pondering the precise nature of Joan's uncanny ability to replicate my ideas, we received an unexpected visitor at our home. "Dad, who is this?" I asked, a puzzled expression on my face as I looked at the man in sunglasses standing in our living room. My father introduced him. "This is Bob." I had him check out our feng shui before, and after following his suggestions, I truly felt a lot better physically. You mentioned those incidents at work, so I thought something seemed off and had Bob come over to check things out for you. And Bob didn't fit the stereotypical image of someone with expertise in such esoteric matters. He looked younger than his stated age and possessed a casual demeanor that belied any air of mysticism. Sensing my skepticism, he removed his sunglasses and asked, "Have you been feeling unusually tired lately?" I paused, considering his question. Yes, I had been feeling a persistent fatigue, a weariness that seemed to go beyond the usual exhaustion of a demanding job. At the time, I had simply attributed it to late nights and stress, dismissing it as a temporary consequence of my work situation. But now, looking at Bob, a seed of doubt began to sprout in my mind. "Yeah," I replied slowly, Especially my shoulders. They're sore. Bob nodded knowingly. There's something unclean attached to you. You're feeling tired because someone put a curse on you. That person can enter your body through this curse. It's like he's sharing your soul, and that's why you feel exhausted. A shiver of unease ran down my spine. Before I could ask for further clarification, Bob continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone. This is just the beginning. If it's not lifted in time, your soul will start to fade. Eventually, you'll get edged out and won't be able to take control of your body again. By that time, you won't be the real you. Someone wants to replace you. The implications of his words were chillingly clear. I didn't need to think long about who might be behind such a malicious act. I had initially believed that Joan's motivation was simply to steal my work and advance her own career. But Bob's pronouncement suggested a far more sinister agenda. She wanted to take over my very being, to erase me and assume my life. All her seemingly friendly gestures after joining the company now appeared in a new, disturbing light, a calculated ploy to gain access, to weave her way into my life, and to think I had, for a fleeting moment, considered her a genuine friend. My father's face was etched with worry. He turned to Bob, his voice urgent. Is there a way to fix this? Of course there is, Bob replied, reaching into his pocket. As long as you make the person who cursed you take this, the curse will break. He handed me a small white pill. Looking at the unassuming tablet, a plan began to form in my mind. I knew that directly confronting Joan was no longer a viable option. To make her ingest this pill, I would need the assistance of someone else, someone she trusted, or at least someone she wouldn't immediately suspect. Luckily, the perfect person came to mind. Eager to resolve this unsettling situation as quickly as possible, I arranged to meet him near the company at noon the following day. As expected, Jack arrived on time, his expression a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. I held out the pill. If you can get Joan to take this pill, I said, my voice carefully modulated, she'll fall in love with you soon and you'll finally get your dream girl. Jack looked deeply skeptical. Really? Why are you helping me? Adopting a convincingly sad demeanor, I responded, I'm not really helping you. After leaving the company, I felt bad about fighting with Joan. She was my best friend there, Jack. I can see you're a good guy. If Joan's happy with you, I'll be happy too. Jack, blinded by his infatuation, readily believed my fabricated sincerity. He pocketed the pill, promising he would ensure Joan took it. Knowing the depth of his obsession, I had no doubt he would follow through. Within a few days, a noticeable lightness returned to me. The persistent fatigue that had plagued me began to dissipate, and even my cat, sensing a shift in my energy, started curling up on my lap again instead of avoiding me. Jack must have succeeded in his mission. I sent him a text message to confirm. Did you get Joan to take the pill? Jack replied quickly, yeah, thankfully it could be crushed and dissolved in water. Otherwise, I don't know how I would have done it, but I don't think it worked. I reassured him. The effects aren't immediate. Give it some time. Once he had confirmed that Joan had indeed ingested the pill, I couldn't help but chuckle with a sense of grim satisfaction. With the immediate threat seemingly neutralized, I decided to take a simple, low-profile job at the company using a slightly altered identity to witness Joan's inevitable downfall up close. The day I walked into the office with my new credentials, the manager and Jack were visibly stunned, their mouths agape in disbelief. Only Joan's face remained tense, her jaw clenched so tightly I thought she might crack a tooth. The colleagues who had once whispered behind my back now looked nervously away, their earlier gossip suddenly feeling very exposed. How did Lisa suddenly become the chairman's daughter? No idea. You think she'll hold a grudge? We weren't wrong. She did take Joan's proposal. Shh, keep it down. Ignoring the hushed conversations, I made my way to my new office. Lisa, Joan said, her voice strained as she grabbed my arm. I never imagined your real identity. I'll have to depend on you now. The manager cast Joan a knowing glance. Her sudden shift in tactics, bypassing her direct superiors to curry favor with the boss's daughter, didn't seem particularly astute. It wasn't long before Joan found herself constantly assigned the most challenging tasks. Her inefficiency, now unmasked without my ideas to plagiarize, led to frequent reprimands from the supervisors, and even Jack's desperate attempts to shield her proved futile. The evaluation for permanent positions arrived swiftly. Joan's submission failed to meet the required standards, and after a brief deliberation, the outcome was clear. She had not passed. When the results were officially announced, Joan visibly trembled, her composure finally cracking. Like a shattered vase, she lunged at me, her voice laced with accusation. Did you? Did you abuse your power to keep me from passing? Why come back after quitting? Tell me where I went wrong. Tell me. I gently but firmly pulled her away, watching her unravel with a detached sense of observation. If you think your work is so good, I said, my voice calm and steady, we can show everyone. Stop accusing me of personal bias. You copied my proposal just fine, didn't you? And you know exactly what you did, don't you? My words seemed to trigger a profound reaction. Joan's face paled, and she suddenly clutched her head, collapsing to the floor. My head hurts. You know everything. You know everything. When did you find out? No wonder I can't get into your body anymore. Why is it that you were born a privileged heiress while I have to climb step by step? If you hadn't quit suddenly, I would have passed the evaluation. She scrambled to her feet, her eyes wild and unfocused. I'm going to find the master. Your identity, everything you have, will be mine, all mine. No one can stop me. Seeing her increasingly erratic behavior, Jack anxiously rushed over to her, attempting to restrain her. Joan, what's up? Calm down. He then turned to me, his eyes bloodshot with anger and suspicion. What did you do to her? Is it because of that pill? You dared to deceive me. Witnessing his volatile reaction, I signaled to the bodyguards I had discreetly positioned nearby. Having been betrayed once before, I had no intention of being caught off guard again. What pill? Joan suddenly looked up, her gaze locking onto Jack with a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. Jack, flustered and desperate to explain, blurted out, She gave it to me. She said it would make you fall in love with me, so I gave it to you. Upon hearing his confession, Joan's demeanor shifted from manic to murderous. She grabbed Jack by the neck, her fingers tightening around his throat. So it was you, she hissed, her voice filled with venom. You ruined my plan. I was so close to succeeding. According to the plan, in a matter of time, I would escape this life and be free from your workplace harassment. Love you. Stop dreaming. Look at yourself. Do you think you deserve it? Seeing you just makes me sick. Normally, I had to stick around you and pretend to like your gestures just to get your help. I was about to puke myself. Hearing her brutal rejection, Jack, who had initially seemed somewhat contrite, appeared utterly crushed. Do you not like me at all? He whispered, his voice barely audible. Never, Joan spat. Jack let her continue to strangle him for a moment, his head bowed in silent despair. Then, in a sudden, shocking movement, he pulled a small folding knife from his pocket and stabbed Joan repeatedly, the blade flashing in the fluorescent office lights. Her blood splattered onto his face as he continued his frenzied attack. Then just die, die, die. Witnessing the horrific scene unfold, the colleagues who had been morbidly curious just moments before screamed in terror and scattered, their faces pale with shock. Joan soon collapsed to the ground, a crimson pool spreading around her lifeless body. I quickly instructed the bodyguards to restrain Jack, preventing any further violence. His arms were pinned behind him, his body pressed to the floor, as he muttered incoherently, How can you not like me? How? The arrival of the police and ambulances was swift, bringing a semblance of order to the chaotic scene. Jack and Joan were taken away separately. Tragically, despite the paramedics' efforts, Joan succumbed to her severe injuries. Jack, found guilty of intentional murder, was sentenced to life imprisonment. The individual who had provided Joan with the manipulative curse method, a shadowy figure known only as the Master, was also apprehended and taken into police custody for promoting harmful schemes. With the disturbing episode finally resolved, my father and I paid a special visit to Bob, expressing our sincere gratitude with a generous gift. I finally heeded my father's advice and agreed to work within our family business, remaining under his guidance to ensure I would not encounter such treacherous situations again.